Welcome to High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today we're joined by the owner of Hockey IQ, Troy Smith. Troy is recognized for his extensive experience as both a player and coach, both the amateur and professional levels. His hockey journey included a 4-year stint in the Ontario Hockey League. He went on to play higher education as a student athlete for St. Francis Xavier in Nova Scotia. And his tenure there helped shape his understanding of the game from different perspectives. The varsity hockey team won the national championships in 2004 while he obtained a Bachelor of Arts in History and Political Science. He also had the opportunity to coach in the Ontario Hockey League as a head coach and an assistant coach. Smitty's a super smart hockey man. It's the second time we've had him on the podcast. We talk about everything, the life of a skill coach, communication. We talk about summer do's and don'ts and his recommendations. We speak about Hockey IQ again, and we speak about the playoffs, the final 8 teams, what he's seeing, and the style of play. It's a fantastic podcast. Troy's a really smart guy. I always enjoy talking with him. Hope you find this a really enjoyable 45 minutes to an hour. Welcome in. Welcome to the podcast, Smitty. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me again. It's great to be here.
Man, we're batting 1,000. This is the second time on the podcast, and I'm pumped. A lot of things to digest and go over, and I want to talk on the tail end of our conversation about the playoffs and where we're right now in the National Hockey League. But let's talk first about some updates. Hockey IQ, how has the business been going? I know, obviously, some seasons are still on. Are you working with certain players? How has the business evolved since we last spoke?
The business has evolved immensely, really. I initially thought coming into this would all be about coaches, but it's actually kind of flip-flopped the other way, where the site is a bit of a placeholder where there's obviously some great, or I feel they're great videos, but it's really transitioned to more mentorship of individual players, looking at their games, and then intertwining that with Hockey IQ clips, helping some teams. I've signed up a couple organizations and continuing to work daily on just trying to update my clips, improving my knowledge. And it's really given me a shot of energy, because working with young players is what I love to do, and watching them have success has been just outstanding.
So walk us through that, Smitty. A young player reaches out to you. Maybe they found you through Hockey IQ, your social media, and you start working with players. How does that work? Hey, I want to watch 5 game segments and get back to you. Or, hey, listen, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Talk me through what you want to work on. How does it work with a potential client looking for your services?
It really depends on the player. Some players want more. For the most part, it's usually in 5 game segments. I find if you get too many games all at once, it becomes a little bit redundant. And I don't think you want to overload the player with too much information, because really, in my position, having been a coach at a high level, I believe it's a bit of an add-on where it's just maybe a different voice. There's not as much pressure when I'm speaking to a player. It's not like a coach who it has the potential to bench the player or anything like that. And really, it's just a matter of sitting down with the player, usually their family, and discussing where their game's at, where they'd like to see it go, and just understanding that, you are hiring me to tell you what I really believe you need. And I think the big thing is just trying to eliminate the fluff of it all and getting down to business, where it's not the most attractive, it's not the best looking thing at the bar, but it's the items that are really going to make a difference for you and make you a better player, make you effective as your game grows.
We talked about this the first podcast, fundamentals, not fluff. We talked about reoccurring themes. We talked about patterns, whether you're a forward or D. Hypothetical example, if you're working with a forward, do you have big rocks that you're looking for? And let me give you a few that come to mind for me, but I don't want to load you or bias you. Maybe it's first touch. Maybe it's puck protection, increasing ozone time. Maybe it is wall work. Do you bucket certain qualities that you say, this is what I'm looking for a forward, this is what I'm looking for a D, this person is a 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10. This is what they need to work on and improve.
Every player is going to be different. So 1,000%. There's different buckets. Some players, you have to tell them, hey, you're going to have to work on this skill or that skill. But I would say for most players, it's really just positioning, because
Yep.
the players today are just so skilled. They really just need to know where to go. And I'll give myself a shameless plug here. They're on my YouTube, which I've kind of half started. There's a clip from one night.
Maybe real quick, tell everyone what your YouTube is. I'll link it, but what is it?
I should know what it is. It's Hockey IQ Can, I believe. We'll have to link it down below, but that's where I got to get better a little bit that way. It was one night in the playoffs. There's 27 goals scored, and 26 of them were scored from the home plate. And what I mean by the home plate is essentially if you took the two posts out to the dot to the top of the circle and drew a line across the top, that would be the home plate. So talking to players, because as the skill gap gets smaller, where the difference in skills gets smaller, you have to be able to play inside of traffic. Minor hockey, see a lot of skilled players. They can make a pass through 3-4 guys. That starts to close up as you move up. So just, things like that, with defensemen getting comfortable skating forwards when you've only been told to skate backwards, or how to effectively use a stick. There's a clip that I posted on the Instagram with Esa Lindell, who's been tremendous for the Stars this year.
Yep.
And just really, it's an extremely simple play where he's just literally popping the puck. Or there was a clip in Buffalo, drawing a blank on the Bowen Byram.
Yep.
It amazes me how many views this clip has got, but it tells you what the people are looking for in terms of, it was literally a D to D and what I would call take ice. So it's D to D, skate until you have to make a play. It got a tremendous response. So I'm really learning as I go, because I will fully admit that there's been clips that I put on and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a world beater. People are going to love this. Yep. And it just falls flat. And it's really the simplistic parts of the game that I think people are looking for. And that's been the best response.
Has that always been something that's been going on, this idea of I don't want to call it the outside skills coach? I know, obviously, I've listened to the Spit and Chicklets podcast in the past, and Adam Oates works with a lot of the National Hockey League guys as a skill coach during the season, looking at video. Obviously, he takes that same model and goes off season. Is this something that's happening more and more in all leagues? I can speak on my behalf where I'm at, my home plate in Columbus, Ohio, and I believe that there are organizations and businesses that will watch video for players during the season as well and provide that assistance. Is that something that's newer, or has it been going on for a long time, Smitty?
Well, really, you have to give credit where credit's due. Darryl Belfry is kind of the OG. He's the goat of it, and he started it many, many years ago. There is a lot of people doing it now, and you start to see some different things, which, hey, you know what? There's always going to be some difference of opinion, as to what players need. But I really believe, I'll just use my business as an example. If your son or daughter is under 12 years old, sure, they can use some clips and things like that. But the last thing they need is me telling them that they didn't, they should have turned left when they went right, things like that. And I think that's really the challenge. There is an age that it needs to change, but it's definitely more and more prevalent. And when I think back to the OHL, like really, you didn't have time to spend with all those players. Yep. So it really does make sense that coaches like myself and some others can add on to that in terms of just, again, giving you a different voice. But I think it's critical, and I really try to be conscious of this, where you have to talk to the player or get feedback from the player in terms of what their coach is telling them. Yes. Because if you get caught too much in the systems, you're not putting the player in a good position. So you have to understand. And there's been times where, I've said, hey, this, you should be doing this. And, the player quite simply tells me, well, coach is telling us to do this. Okay, no problem. Let's move on from that and work on some different things that we can do. And it's really just more taking advantage of opportunities that maybe they don't see, and maybe their coach doesn't have enough time to spend with that player. And for lack of a better term, kind of hold their hand through the process.
You brought up several questions I was going to ask, and I think you answered them. I know from your experiences being a player and then obviously playing in the OHL and playing professional hockey, I think it's a delicate balance between what you're speaking with regarding what you're seeing with the player, and then obviously understanding the whether it's the forward check back, whatever the D zone coverage is, and not trying to quote unquote interfere with the coach in providing a narrative of what that player needs to work on. I also think what you said is really, really, I mean, think about it for a second. I mean, how much time, especially at the higher levels, I mean, you're watching so much video, but you're watching it most of the time, you're watching the team play, breakdowns, et cetera. You're not really focusing and harnessing on that one individual where you can really focus on shift over shift and small little nuances that can essentially help that player find better spots on the ice or become a better player. So it is interesting.
Yeah, and that's in fairness to the everyday coaches, I guess you'd
Sure.
call them, your team coaches.
Yep.
That's true. You're looking at your team concepts, what your team needs to do to be successful. And everybody tries to do as much as they can with those individual players. But, for example, the one player that I worked with this year who had tremendous results, it was literally just a matter of explaining to him that he needed to get what I would call inside more. So closer to that coverage rather than further away. And that little adjustment, there was a number of other things that we talked about and stuff that came up, but that one little adjustment allowed him to use his skill more effectively, because really he was kind of standing on an island away from the pile where this kid has all the skill in the world, great player. I think he's got a bright future. But by getting closer, he was actually able to exploit the other team using the skills that he had acquired as a young kid and now as he's growing up, which is a little bit counterintuitive to what we all think. We think, oh, we need to get away so we have time and space, but you just don't have that. I think I'm articulating that properly. Hopefully it makes sense.
And piggybacking on that now, and we're going to talk about the playoffs, but that ice is hard to come by, that interior ice. That's a tough man's game.
Yeah. But the one thing I would say is that you don't have to be big to do it. It's a mindset. There's different tactics you can use. I think I told a story about Staios the last time. I remember Steve Staios, president of the Ottawa Senators, telling me a story about, I believe it was Holmstrom for Detroit, where he was standing in front. And this is more, there's a different way to get to that net front than just running to the net blindly or aimlessly. And he said he's standing in front, and all of a sudden Holmstrom went around the net, knocks him out of the way. Puck's sitting there and he bangs it in. Well, that's one way to do it. And I would say it's called getting lost. And Austin Matthews is great at that. He's a great player to watch that way, where you really got to wonder how a guy, now he didn't have a great season this year, but he's still an elite scorer, how he finds that space. Or a guy like Ovechkin. I know we've all watched the one time, but how does he score so many goals still, knowing that he's the greatest goal scorer of all time?
Many ways to reach the same destination, in terms of finding creative ways to find that interior ice. Slight pivot. The skill work now for most teams is coming to an end, right? There's 8 teams now left in the National Hockey League. Most all minor hockey is done. Summer's upon us, right? And I know there's no wrong answer here, but from an overarching philosophy, we want to talk about some of the do's and don'ts of summer ice. So I'll give you an idea here in Columbus, and I'm guessing in your area, in your neck of the woods in Canada, it's probably, I don't want to say the same. I mean, we've had kids now at the AAA level, their season's ended, their tryouts are essentially 3-4 weeks after. They're right into spring ice, they're right into summer ice, and they're right into the next season. You've been doing this for a long time. You've coached at some of the highest levels. I know there's no perfect lists of do's and don'ts, but let's just take a hypothetical player that's not a 11 or 12-year-old. Let's say he's a 16, 17-year-old looking to get better. What are some things, a checklist of some do's and maybe some don'ts that you would kind of push away from in terms of focusing on skill acquisition in the off season?
So if you're specifically skill acquisition, I do think you need rest at times, but that can be too much. Like you don't want to be to the point where you don't want to go to the rink. You should be excited to go to the rink. Only the player knows that. You and I can't tell a player, hey, you're skating too much or anything like that. The player has to understand their own body. A guitar player would never put down their guitar for 3 or 4 months and then go on a world tour. They would continue to just, even if it's just gentle, working on little things. And if you look at the overall perspective, I would say the don't would be, don't go back to what you're just familiar with and you know you're good at when you're talking about on the ice. If I'm a good one-time shooter, sure, get your reps in at the end, but work on a skill that's going to make you better, whether that's and work on those little skills. So it could be picking up a puck along the dasher boards, maybe it's tipping pucks, whatever that is, but something that you're not good at that you need to improve at.
Sure.
And I think the most important thing is you have to be honest with yourself as to what you need to work on. And the example I would give, and to be honest, it was probably one of the hardest conversations I had, but one of the best conversations. And I don't think that he'll care that I bring it up because I really respect this man. But when I parted ways with Kitchener, I was quite upset. I'd been there for 9 years, first head coaching opportunity, but it was recommended by someone, I can't remember who, that I call Al MacInnis because Ryan, his son, had played on our team. And I called Al and we had a great conversation. Phenomenal, because he was honest with me. It wasn't something where I was offended by what he was telling me, because at the end of the day, I think deep down we all know the truth about ourselves.
Sure.
So I would encourage players to have conversations with people that they know are actually going to tell them the truth.
Yep.
And an example of that, and I think you would appreciate this, is power skating.
Yep.
The number of players that mistake the need for a power skating coach, and there are players that need power skating coaches. There's lots of great power skating coaches, but the amount of players that mistake needing a power skating coach when they really need the gym is remarkable. And the parents are wasting their money a lot of times. Like, my personal opinion, if you've got a skating issue, they should go see you, Matt Nickel, guys like that first, to see where you sit, because it is, and I'll talk a little bit about these cognitive coaches that have become really popular lately. It's great that you can improve your reaction time and things like that. But ultimately, if you're a player and you first don't know where you have to go, it doesn't matter. As a newborn, we start by rolling over, then you crawl, then you walk, then you run. And I really think that's where players have to be honest with themselves. Like, what do I really need? And give it some thought. But if you can't do the movement, go to the gym first, because that's going to solve it.
It's funny. I call it low-hanging fruit, and what you're talking about is taking the chainsaw to just trim the shrubs. You're using the wrong tool. It's amazing to me how just picking up that low-hanging fruit can help. I always tell young parents, what can I do? I say the best conditioning is having your kid move better and get stronger in the gym at a young age. Have them focus on that. Have them be able to hold that hockey posture, getting down low, getting down and not being, bobbing up and down. That's the low-hanging fruit. And I think sometimes we want to have this bountiful harvest where we have to hire all these, and again, I know you and I are on the same page here. Obviously, there's some great power skating coaches and they do great jobs, but I'm with you on that in terms of the low-hanging fruit. The other thing that came to my mind when you spoke, we tell this to players. I think the last time you and I spoke, I said this to you, but I with all of the resources available now, Smitty, I mean, you got power skating, you've got strength and conditioning. And when I say strength and conditioning, Smitty, like now you got speed guys, power guys, this Olympic, there's a Rolodex. We tell our athletes two things: trim the fat. Make a list of what you want to get accomplished, and instead of adding to your list, trim the fat. And then the last thing I'll say, and people that know me well would probably say, really, Anthony, because I was a subpar hockey player from college on, and I had to get anywhere on a roster by working hard. But I tell our young athletes, if hard work was the key to success, the donkey would run the farm. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that you don't work hard, but you got to work smart. You got to find out what it is that you need to focus on and have a rifle-like approach in solving that problem, as opposed to throwing every single coach something different every day and not knowing what the hell worked.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like, there has to be a funnel to what it is that you need to accomplish. And you can't accomplish everything in one foul swoop. It takes time, but there are certain things that, most players, it's usually quickness or things like that. And, from what you were talking about with the donkey, if you want to be on a winning team and you're the thoroughbred of the team, then you need to still be the donkey, because the thoroughbred is going to be followed by all the donkeys if you're the hardest worker, and that will lead to team success, which will then breed into individual success. And that's a topic for another time, but it really is important. But I agree completely with you that you need to start small and then build up. And as things get better, if it's flexibility, your flexibility gets better as the summer goes on, then you can move to the next. But that's where you do have pros. And I don't want it to sound like I'm saying don't hire a power skating coach, because some people do need power skating coaches. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying focus and find a way to figure out what you really need to help yourself.
I think too, we talked about trimming the fat. I always try to use this idea for me of a shotgun approach versus a rifle-like approach. Obviously you're going to use a rifle. You're going to get much more accurate to the bullseye. I think for young athletes, really young athletes, let's talk under the age of 12. I think you can have more of a shotgun approach. You can get into the strength and conditioning, get into a skills class, get into run fast. When you get older like that, you got to really think, like, how can I improve my craft? You talked about the guitar playing, right?
Yep.
Every young guitar player has to learn the basic chords, right?
Yep.
And then as you age and you progress, you got to be able to learn those basic chords very fast. You got to move up and down the fretboard. You got to be able to do them with your eyes closed. You got to be able to harmonize those and make those sounds good to the ear with other music and other accompaniment. I guess what I'm saying is that rifle-like approach, from my opinion, has to be probably more for older players. Do you agree with that? Or is it?
I would agree 100%. And it goes back to what I talked about when I had some younger parents contact me. It makes no sense other than to show them some videos and some very basic concepts, because ultimately we all want to make money at this game and have a great living and play at the highest level. Realistically, that's not going to happen for the majority of us. The goal of the game, my opinion, let's just call it 13 and under, and that's really being unfair because it should be at all times, is just to have the kids fall in love with the game. Because then as they get older, if they do have to put in the work and they get better, they still love it. You love coming to the game. And I agree, but I also agree that you should play in the summer. If you're younger, play a different sport. Like we would see a lot of times in Kitchener and other places, the European players were way better, very generically speaking, but they were way better at using their feet because they'd played so much soccer. And that's a great skill. And then you have some other kids that played lacrosse and they might have been tougher inside those tight areas, but do something different while you're continuing to hone your craft of hockey. Don't be a one-trick pony.
What are your thoughts on combines in the summers? We've got every single league's represented, whether it's the North American League, USHL, NCDC, Hockey Night in Boston, tournament teams. I know, again, one size doesn't fit all, so I'm not asking you to give me an exact answer, but what are your thoughts on that? Are recommendations, like, if someone's going to ask you a question and based on your experience as a 16, 17-year-old, what are your thoughts?
I would say be selective, because I understand what they are, but I also think it's a great opportunity to meet some other players,
Yep.
Have fun with it. Some of the combines, if it's for a junior league, sure, maybe that's what you need to do to make that team. But I would do your research on it, be selective. Ultimately, you're going to spend a fair amount of money going to all these things. And the question becomes, and I know a lot of parents battle with it, if I don't have my child in spring hockey, they're going to fall behind. But if you put them in half those tournaments and then put the other half into the gym or training or whatever, are you really falling behind? I don't think so. So I kind of took a Switzerland approach there. I'm not fully against it because I do think there's value in it, but I think everything in moderation.
100%. Talk to me at the onset of our conversation. We were toying around with this hockey IQ. What were some of the comments that on the World Wide Web? Educate the listener on was it a clip that you had posted on your hockey IQ talking about, the software, the thinking part of the game?
Yeah, like there's been a ton of different comments. Actually, my last second last post was the most controversial because, geez, it was,
tell me about it. Tell
well,
us.
it was just about Pete DeBoer,
Okay.
and really just showing, and you would understand this. And, all I was trying to do was show this is one of the reasons why I feel Pete's a great coach. Timeout. Pete's not at the board. Alain Nasruddin is at the board, trusting his staff, empowering his staff. And the message is, this is a great thing to do.
Yep.
And the messages that I got about it were unbelievable. Every coach in the league does it. Well, unfortunately, that night, the other coach didn't, right? I'm not saying that that's a normal thing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying he's got a pretty good Game 7 record. And that just shows calm and composure and all those things, to where, it definitely triggered some people, which, hey, it's good for engagement, but it's really quite interesting just to hear what people say in terms of things they didn't know that I think sometimes people have been around for a while take for granted. The big conversation, as I talked about, is just the cognitive part, which I do believe there's a part for it, but this is where I think the waters get really muddied, where Ben Finelli, who's an ex-player of mine, he's a licensed psychotherapist. So what he's doing is different than what I'm doing. And what I'm doing and Ben's doing is different than what a cognitive specialist is doing. And I believe you had, I can't remember the doctor's name on your podcast, who does kind of similar to Ben, Alicia.
Yeah. Yep.
Natural. Yeah. So, and those two do great stuff, where it's more about, from what I can see, it's more about, okay, I've had a bad shift. How do I refocus?
Yep.
Then you've got the cognitive that is all about reaction. And for me, it's about, you have to learn the game before you can do all of those things, right? And, because really you shouldn't be, and this is where I think it's a challenge for me. And I had this conversation with Ben. By giving a player too much information, which is always my fear, you can cripple them. Because the whole idea of the game is that, you've had so many reps and you've seen this clip so many times that you're just going. You're just going. And that would be where the cognitive comes in. But you need to learn that first part first of where you need to be. Because without that, you really have nothing. And I think the fear would be, you don't want to become the player that's got $1 million wheels and a 2-cent brain.
Yeah.
It's the truth. And we've all seen players like that, I would never name a specific player. I think it's completely disrespectful, but you need to know when to slow down, speed up, but ultimately you want that to become natural in the player. And I think if you could ever get 3 people on, the one side with Ben and Alicia, me and somebody else, let's say, and then the cognitive side, and bring that all together, it could be a really powerful tool.
You and I spoke about this before a long while ago. It's not to say, measurement and what we're currently measuring isn't important. So let me preface it by saying that. But, the hardest things to measure are closest to the scoreboard, the hardest things to measure. And I remember Tarasov's old quote, speed of hand, speed of foot, the speed of mind. The most important is speed of mind. This idea of processing speed and the ability to find soft ice, the ability to be at the right place. Might not be the fastest guy or the fastest racehorse, in the race, but you look fast by being able to process and think ahead. I'm not putting words in your mouth. Is the best tool for that video? Is the best tool for that packaging drills that make players have to think quickly? Whether it's layering a drill, perhaps it's, no pressure, the ability to scan. Then it's, light token pressure. Then the puck's dumped and it's live, and now the drill's got to be layered. Is it a combination of both of those? How do we train that? Because I can tell you one thing, really darn hard to do off the ice. I say target context, target environment. You got to do that, in my opinion, on the ice.
I would agree. If I could give an example of people that make it look easy, when you think about Carey Price,
yep,
probably the greatest goalie in the last, let's just say, 20 years. Did he ever look out of place?
No,
Never.
Effortless.
effortless, but he was processing the whole time where puck's in the corner. And John Gibson's a great example of that. I can remember coaching him in Kitchener. He'd have his foot on the post, and it was actually kind of funny in a way. Puck would be in the corner, and you'd see him just take his stick off the post, point to a guy, and then tell the D that guy's getting the puck. And so by the time he got the puck, John was already set. And understanding that game at that level is only through reps. But to your point, I think the way you learn it is, for what I do, it's about away from the puck. It really is, because you're trying to read where you need to go 2 to 3 steps ahead. So let's just say you're the weak side winger. There's a thing called slash support. So the puck starts on your side. If I'm the right winger, goes from right D to left D behind the net, up the wall. Well, as soon as you see them going D to D, most teams, a lot of teams are going to send that right winger out of the zone. If you can't read that happening and anticipate that, you're out of luck. And that's where I think the hockey IQ part comes in. Yep. Or reading that one guy's beat, I got to collapse, help out, most dangerous man, whatever, maybe reading that guys are going to the bench. Okay, this is where I need to go. That's where I can come in terms of ability to make plays, though, and what we talked about with the home plate and in tight areas. I really believe that's all small area games.
Yeah.
And, parents lose their noodle, at least up here in Canada, about their kids having to play half ice and they need to play full ice. No, they don't. Because when you watch an NHL game, very, very rarely, and I was talking about this with a guy I really respect, coaching a team in Hamilton, PJ Eden, this year. When you watch the NHL, none of those players, I shouldn't say none, but the majority of the time, they never attack a stick until it's below the goal, below the top of the circles. And what I mean by that is, if I'm coming one-on-one with you, Anthony, and it's through the neutral zone, I'm not trying to put it through your skates. Sure. I'm going to either try and skate by you, I'm going to skate the space, whatever it may be. But if you do small area games over and over and over, that's when you start to realize, okay, this guy's on my right shoulder. I got to turn, I got to listen, I got to feel. And those sorts of reps, you can't teach that in video.
Yep.
It starts with training at a young age. And that's where it's great that these kids are all more skilled. But then it's we'll use the musician example again. I learned my chops. I got all the chords. I can do a solo like nobody's business. But then all of a sudden you throw a drummer in there. Am I able to play at the pace of the drummer and the bass player?
Yep.
And that's where you got the skills to play. How do you bring that into the band?
You watch so much video. So talk to me about players right now that are elite at that. Give me 2 or 3 players that pop up to you that you'd say just elite processing speed. Might not be the fastest guys, or maybe conversely, they are the fastest guys and they have the fastest processing speed.
This guy's not the fastest guy. I don't think it's any secret if you watch any of my clips, but Wyatt Johnston. Oh, he's elite. Oh. And he doesn't, if you just watched him, and I would use this example, if he was out playing men's league with you and I, and he didn't have a Dallas Stars uniform on, I bet you nobody would know. And they'd be like, that's Wyatt Johnston? But his skill, and he's not slow. I've been on the ice with him. He's not slow at all. But he's so methodical. And I don't think that you can, I don't know how you teach some of the things that kid does.
I know.
And there's a high respect level for that kid throughout the whole league. Cole Perfetti is a good example of that. Yep. He's a guy that he's never going to blow the doors off you, but scored 2 massive goals in Game 7 for Winnipeg. Yep. And just so smart. And I remember the first time watching him, I was at Scotiabank Pond in Toronto for the OHL Cup. He was playing for the Vaughan Kings. They had a pretty good team. It was him, Ty Tullio, I can't remember the other kid, a defenseman, good team. But I walked in and I remember watching Cole go down the wall, delay, carry the puck up, total control of the whole game, make a play. They didn't score, but right then, it was literally one play. I was like, this kid's got super high hockey IQ.
Sure.
And it's just that patience. And, so there's guys like him. I think John Tavares is a great example. His game has really evolved this year. Again, not a guy that's going to blow the doors off you with speed, but he finds those tight areas. And you talk about different sports. There's a guy, his uncle's one of the best lacrosse players of all time. I would be shocked if you asked John Tavares if lacrosse helped him like in the middle of the ice, if he wouldn't say absolutely, because he's just so smart at finding those little areas. And then he uses his skill from there. There's him, Sam Reinhart. He's phenomenal, like just a brilliant, brilliant player. And then you look at some of the defensemen, like when you think about Forsling for Florida, he's not underrated. People know who he is now, but in my opinion, he's still underrated. Not a big guy, but just so smart, good with his stick, great angles. Thomas Harley, Slavin for Carolina, like he really kind of came out in that Four Nations tournament. And then, you have other guys too that understand their role and go out and execute. And this guy would not get as much credit as he should, but Tommy Wilson.
Yep.
Like you have to be smart to be able to play the way he does and be such a benefit to his team. You have to be. Strome is another example. There's a guy that, again, if he was out with you and I, Anthony, people would be like, that's not Strome. And it's like, yeah, he's pretty good, but he just so smart. So smart. So sorry, I didn't mean to hijack the conversation on that.
It flows right into the next bit of our conversation. Let's talk about the NHL playoffs. I know you watch a ton of video. 8 teams left. We got Dallas, Winnipeg, we got Florida, Toronto, Carolina, Washington, Vegas, Edmonton. So far, your overall impression thus far of the playoffs, in terms of what you're seeing on the ice, and then any surprises or, anything that you're going to be looking at, to get onto the next round in terms of success for these teams.
I'm kind of geeking out about it, and there's no. It's
keep posting because I like listening.
Well, this part is just something I started on the side for my own curiosity, and we'll have to maybe revisit it as to where it plays out. But I was watching the Vegas game, and just hey, they've won a cup in the last couple of years, but just how much Stone and Eichel play.
Real quick timeout. Take Stone, put him in that most previous conversation that we just had.
1,000%.
Oh my God.
Best stick in the NHL.
I've never seen a guy on the half wall as good as Mark. Never.
Yeah, 1,000%. But I'm watching that, and they're playing. I did it based on Monday, and Tuesday, and they were playing 22 and 21 minutes a night. Can you sustain that over the course of even a 7-game series? Because I've always been a believer that you do need a team, and to win in the playoffs, you need to be able to get through a series quick, at least one of them, and if not, then you got to have a ton of depth. And like Vegas, I'm kind of obsessing about Vegas here a little bit, but like without Pietrangelo the other night, without Haig, for me that was their secret sauce when they won with Mish there. Right? Like their defense core was just, you couldn't get through those guys to the middle of the ice. Just
mobile,
stinky.
Yeah.
And then, you look at Winnipeg, and I know that Morrissey got hurt, but you've got 2 guys, Sandberg and Pionk, that are playing, 25 minutes a night. It's like, how sustainable is that? And maybe it is, because Harley's playing the same amount of minutes.
I know.
And then Carolina's got a ton of players playing some big minutes. So I'm looking at that to kind of see, I want to look at it after this round and see if that's went down, what the coaches are doing. I'm really trying to study the coaches to figure out if there is something or if I'm just wasting my time. But I do think that there is something to that. And I guess we'll see. But then past that, I'm just looking at special teams as well, because they've always said, you got to have 100 to 110 combined to be really, really good.
What do they say? 85, 25, like elite?
Something like that.
Something like that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds exactly right. But I can tell you in the regular season, not one of those teams only one of those teams had more than 110. Actually,
Wow.
sorry, none of them did. My apologies. I'm reading it wrong there. Not one of them had. The highest one was 108 with Winnipeg, which
Wow.
their power play was number one in the
I was
league.
going to say, won a league,
Yeah.
right?
And they've had a drop. Washington has really dropped in terms of their combined. And Carolina has had the biggest lift. Like they're up 25 percentage points. So the question becomes, and again, I'm being a geek about this, but can they sustain that? Can Carolina continue to make that kind of hay? Because I've always dismissed special teams in playoffs because you get less power plays and less penalties.
Yep.
But does it actually become more important because the opportunities are so rare?
I was going to say, right? That and the fact that, well, it's kind of certain series, I can't say this, but I mean, it's tough scoring 5-on-5. The games aren't, they're 3-2 games, 2-1 games, although certain series have, the scoreboard has kind of exploded, but it's just tough to find ice.
Yeah, 1,000%. It gets really muddy out there. And so for me, I'm geeking out about that. Like you look at McDavid, he's the highest forward at 23 minutes, which I get it. If I was Knobloch, I'd have him out there 30. Yep. He's just so.
Look at Rantanen now. He's getting double shifted.
Yeah. And you know what? That's kind of out of Pete's character, but it worked pretty good last night. And for me, that's, it's away from really what I do in the hockey IQ thing, but it comes back to a little bit of my roots where I really enjoy the chess match and something that I just like watching it and kind of trying to understand, like, how does this guy, when you think about Nick Lidstrom, that guy used to play 30 minutes a night and effortless.
I know.
If you watch old videos, he's anti what we always say to defensemen about get your stick out, stick on puck. And then he always played with two hands, but he was able to do it. And it's amazing. So that's the geek coming out in me.
Without going too far deep, in order to have success and move on to the third round, is it special teams? Is it goaltending? This time of year, both are important. I always say with some of this stuff too, scoreboard's not what happens. It's what survives the shipwrecks of judgment and chance. And sometimes you got to have a little bit of good judgment. And a lot of times it's just a damn puck bounce. And, you could play the best game in the world and it just bounces the wrong way. What does each team need to do to get onto the next step, the third round?
Well, I think, there's an old Dr. Hollowell who used to work with Hockey Canada, and he gave me this line, and it was the gag rule. And that's get a goalie or you're going to gag in the playoffs. So the goalies are always number one, the poor goalies.
Yep.
Parents who have kids that are goalies, I feel bad for it because there's a lot of pressure. But so number one, you need that. I think you work for your bounces.
I agree.
Like if I was to go through all these series, like, the Leafs and Panthers, I think the Leafs have played really well, so I'm not taking anything away from them, but I don't think we've seen the best of the Panthers yet.
Yep.
They still seem, for whatever reason, a little bit discombobulated. Vegas and the Oilers, I don't know what to think of that series, to be honest with you, because you got the best, in my opinion, the best two players in the world in terms of combination with McDavid and Draisaitl. Their defense, though, is actually playing well. Like, Paul Coffey's done a great job there. I think Jake Wallman was a good pickup for them.
Yep.
So, but, if Vegas can get healthy, they still have guys that are game breakers, and they have won. I know Edmonton got to the finals, but they won. So not really sure how to put that one. In terms of Carolina, Washington, like Carolina plays some of their players a lot, and that's where I started really watching it as well. Like they have three forwards that are over 20 minutes a night. Them and Winnipeg are the only two, but Winnipeg's had a couple double overtime games, so it's not really fair to consider that.
Yep.
But can they continue to do that? Like, can Jarvis play at that level for that long with those kind of minutes? So, again, but I love the way Carolina plays. I love it. Like I'm a shot volume guy.
Oh yeah, they hum.
It's a great, and they're very much like their coach. Like they're a hardworking, gritty, in your face team, high volume, but I have trouble betting against Tom Wilson. I really do, because I think I talk about it all the time, probably to some people's dismay, but I think Tom Wilson is one of the most valuable players in the NHL. And the reason why I say that, I would ask you this question. In the Montreal series, were the Montreal players more worried about Alex Ovechkin or Tom Wilson? I know what I'm doing, because I can tell you, sitting on the bench and coaching him at an under 17, like that Plymouth rink that he played in junior, it's small. Like that's where I played. And he would dump the puck in, and I felt bad for my defenseman, because he's going to whack you. And that's the advantage of a player like that. And that's where I think young players find your niche. Because Tommy's not going to go in and toe drag you or anything like that. Willie's going to go in and he's going to be honest. But when you're warming up for the game, those players aren't sitting there looking at Ovechkin. They're going, oh man, is Wilson going to happen? It's human nature. I don't care who you are. So I have a tough time betting against them. Jets and Stars, I think it's going to be a battle. I think last night's game was actually a bit of a disappointment, to be honest with you. I think it was a little sloppy. I think both teams were still coming down, but they, for my money, two best goalies left in the playoffs.
Yes.
I think it's hard to argue that. No, I shouldn't say that. Bobrovsky's pretty good too. So, but that, and I think they play similar styles. So it's going to be, I just love it. It's going to be great. I don't get enough sleep this time of year, but it's well worth it. Worth every minute.
Talk to us and share with the listener, Hockey IQ, your social media sites again, what you're doing, when you'll post, so everyone can get a listen.
Yeah, I post kind of randomly, to be honest with you, but my Instagram, it's Hockey IQ Can. So just spell out the hockey IQ Can, like Canada. That's on Instagram. And from there, you can get to any one of my other sites through YouTube, whatever it may be. And the website's hockeyiq.ca, where you can sign up for newsletter, subscribe to the clips. You know, the clips are basically what you see on the Instagram. And if you want to get in touch with me about individual sessions, by all means, reach out that way.
Our guest today has been Troy Smith. Smitty, thanks so much for joining us, my man.
Thanks, Anthony. I had a ton of fun with this, so I appreciate it.